Heisman now because we did just talk about Aidan Hutchinson, but he is one of the 4 players with C.J. Stroud, Kenny Pickett, and Bryce Young to go to New York for the Heisman finalist as a Heisman finalist. Who is your favorite to win? First off,
I mean, it's got to be Bryce Young. You know, I would honestly maybe pick Aidan second, though. That's maybe a little.
I do have Aidan second. Yeah,
maybe a little bit of homer. It wouldn't surprise me if he was even last necessarily, just because the defensive player thing. But Bryce Young, if he hadn't been so crazy against Georgia, I think Aidan actually legitimately had a chance to win it. Not that Aidan had a bad game against Iowa. He had a great game. He had a sack, a couple tackles for loss, but Iowa wasn't going to let him ruin the game. And that can just happen for a defensive player. I'd say Bryce Young's definitely the odds-on favorite, and he's probably going to run away with it, would be my guess. But Aidan, I would guess, would get some love, and it's really cool that he gets to go. So,
yeah, I actually just really wanted him to go. It just felt like him and Will Anderson. We'll talk about some snubs later. Just definitely seemed like the most dominant defensive players in the league in the college football this year. So, my thoughts on Bryce Young obviously is he led Alabama to yet another SEC championship, over 4,300 yards, 43 touchdown passes, and only 4 INTs. And just beating Georgia the way that he did, I think that likely put him as the favorite to win it. With Aidan, he's a clear leader of the number 2 team in the country in the Big Ten champs. Broke the single season record for the long history in Michigan for sacks, 14 of them, 2 forced fumbles, and a touchdown that was reversed against MSU. If you're looking to look at that, the 3 sacks against OSU was the icing on the cake to send him to New York. I felt like. You got guys like Kenny Pickett from Pittsburgh. He led Pitt to the ACC championship, which it was kind of refreshing to see teams not named Clemson in that this year. 42 touchdown passes, 7 INTs, and over 4,300 passing yards. And if you watch film of Kenny Pickett, he's probably one of the best quarterbacks in the FBS at extending plays. He just moves around really well back there, kind of like Derek Carr-ish. C.J. Stroud, the freshman quarterback, had all the weapons in the world that you'd want. And Jigma Smith, Garrett Wilson, and Olave put up great numbers with nearly 3,900 passing yards, 38 TDs, and only 5 picks. The other knock is the Buckeyes had the worst regular season losses in the last 10 years with 2. That's tied with 2017. Otherwise, they've had 1 or less every single other regular season. So those are obviously, what look to be a clear-cut Heisman candidates. I think the top 2 snubs, I would say, would be the sophomore outside linebacker / edge rusher from Alabama. Will Anderson had 15.5 sacks and 91 tackles, and he was top 3 in tackles for a loss as well. So he dominated. I think part of it's just, Alabama fatigue.
I think that's part of it, and I think that's if
they're not sending 2 Alabama people this year again.
No, and is he? Yeah, he's dominant, arguably the most dominant defensive player in the game this year, but he's on a defense full of dominant defenders too, if you think about it. So yeah, I agree. The Alabama thing, it's like that they have a crazy team all around them. So that's that he kind of gets knocked on that. It's not his fault. He went out there and made plays. So I'd say he was snubbed for sure.
Yeah, and then the other one is Kenneth Walker, the 3rd from Michigan State, the running back, considered one of the 2 biggest snubs probably. He had over 1,600 rushing yards, 18 touchdowns. His downfall was his 6 carries for 25 yards against Ohio State, his 84 yards on 23 carries against Indiana, and the Nebraska game where he was bottled up for only 61 yards on 19 carries in an overtime game. So I think those games kind of really hurt his chances, especially the Ohio State game. You got to do well in the big games is kind of what it appears to be for Heisman candidates. So I think that's kind of what it is. But again, he went crazy against Michigan, obviously with 5 touchdowns. But then you would have to apply the same logic to another Heisman snub that I put in here, Hassan Haskins, with nearly 1,300 rushing yards, 20 touchdown runs. And then what he did in the biggest game of the season versus Ohio State puts him in the conversation. And we saw what he could do as the workhorse running back, even though he was splitting carries for a lot of the year with Blake Corum. So, if you apply the same logic to with Kenneth Walker, obviously more long-term, better stats, because he was certainly the workhorse for Michigan State. Just did really well against Michigan, but then Hassan Haskins did put up almost identical numbers against Ohio State.
Right.
It's like you have to consider both.
Yeah, I mean, I would say Walker probably deserves to be there just because the yards and touchdowns are up there.
And the other thing is, what would Michigan
carried that team? They are.
I was gonna say, what would Michigan State? I was just gonna say, what would Michigan State be without Kenneth Walker? Yeah, 7-5, 6-6, even maybe.
Yeah, they're not. I mean, and that's not a knock on Michigan State. That just means that guy is that much better.
Well, because Michigan State even walked into the year not knowing who Kenneth Walker really was, and then not having the expectations they did. The reason their expectations have been raised now have been because of Kenneth Walker. So,
Yep.
I think that's a big part of it. Matt Corral is another guy I got on this list. He has a mediocre Ole Miss team around him, and he got him 10 wins. He threw for over 3,300 yards, 20 touchdowns, and only 4 picks. And he added 11 rushing touchdowns.
I think he and Pickett are the top 2 QBs, I would say, for the NFL draft. A lot of people I don't know which one I like more.
Some people have Desmond Ritter in that conversation. He's another guy.
Probably got to be in the conversation, but kind of in the new mold of quarterback, can really run. A lot of improvisation in his game. He kind of reminds me of Baker Mayfield, but maybe a little bit better arm, faster. So, I think.
Baker Mayfield's a good comp. I like that.
Yeah, I don't think he necessarily deserves to be in New York, but he definitely put up some nuts numbers this year. So
yeah, and the rest of these guys kind of are guys I wouldn't really say should swap out one of the guys that went with the other. Guys you want to recognize for what they did this year. And I have Bailey Zappa from Western Kentucky. Obviously, it's Western Kentucky, but most passing yards in the FBS by 1,100 yards.
Yeah,
which was the second to Will Rogers. So, great yards per attempt. He has 4 touchdowns away from Joe Burrow's FBS record of 60 touchdown passes in a year. And he's going to play one less game than Joe Burrow, even after the bowl game.
Yeah.
Brought him to a runner-up CUSA championship.
The caveat with that is they literally only throw the ball. They throw the ball 70 times a game, which is cool, but and that's good. I mean, that's awesome. I mean, I watched him play in that. I watched some of that conference championship game, and it was it's fun. He was impressive.
He's a good quarterback, and I'm sure he'll still get select. I think he's going to go somewhere.
I think he will get a shot. He's got a big arm. He seems I think he's going to get a shot at least. Some of those air raid guys.
Ideal build of a quarterback. He has the ideal build of a quarterback too.
Yeah, and some of those air raid guys are not, ideal. These are not the guys that you want to take. But I think you give this guy a shot. I mean, a lot of those guys have been successful, at least as backups. So.
Yeah, I mean, Graham Harrell. I remember how good he was at Texas Tech.
Yeah.
You don't want to necessarily compare Zappa to Harrell because Harrell also was 6 foot tall, so that changes things too.
Yeah.
But another guy I have in here is KJ Jefferson from Arkansas, sophomore. One of 5 FBS passers to throw for 2,500 plus yards, 20 plus TDs, and rush for 500 plus yards and 5 plus TDs. And he only threw 2 INTs. He helped lead a Razorbacks team to an 8-4 year, which Razorbacks were pretty notorious for being the bottom of the SEC. A competent game against Georgia this year might have sent him to New York. Yeah, because all his other games, he was bad against Georgia, did nothing against Georgia. Really only threw the ball 13 times, but just didn't even touch 100 passes.
They were just getting smoked. I mean, they weren't.
It's a 41-0 game. No chance. So, so I think that kind of changed some things. Will Rogers is a brief, notable sophomore quarterback, threw for over 4,400 yards, which was second in the FBS. 35 TDs with 8 picks. And again, so I've listed now a couple of sophomore quarterbacks and players that next year or 2 years, depending if they stay, there's some promise coming out of those drafts. I got Desmond Ritter for this one, quarterback responsible for leading the first non-Power 5 team to the college football playoff. Nearly 3,200 passing yards, 30 touchdowns, 8 picks, 361 yards added rushing, and 6 more touchdown runs. I got Breece Hall, nearly 1,500 rushing yards paired with over 300 receiving yards and 23 total touchdowns from Iowa State. Kieran Williams from Notre Dame, over 1,000 yards rushing, 359 receiving yards, and 17 total TDs. Jordan Davis, the interior defensive tackle from Georgia, led all Power 5 interior linemen with tackles for loss. The 340-plus pound senior is a handful to manage in the middle. Let's see other guys. I've got a couple more here. Lou Nichols, the third from Central Michigan, led all the FBS in rushing yards in 17-10. 15 touchdowns, added 300 yards receiving and 2 more TDs there. Obviously, Central Michigan, so no love, but 1,700 plus rushing yards is no joke when you're only playing 11 games. Tyler Allgeier from Brigham Young tied for first with 20 rushing TDs and 8th in rushing yards in the FBS.
Yeah.
Trayvon Henderson, 7 yards per carry with nearly 1,200 rushing yards, 15 TDs, added nearly 300 yards receiving and 4 more TDs.
If Ohio State would have just handed the ball off to him more often, I think he probably
he's got a bright
had
future.
a chance.
He's got a bright future. Yeah, we'll see what happens in that.
Problem is they want to throw the ball. They want to throw the ball though. That's
hard not to when you have 3 weapons like that. I mean,
true.
It's the reason Jameson Williams had to transfer out. Jeera Stearns, perhaps a byproduct of Zappa's insane year. Stearns led all FBS in catches with 137, which is 7th all time in 1,718 yards with 14 touchdown catches. Almost certainly will finish 3rd all time in receptions in the FBS after the bowl game. He's only 5 away from being 3rd all time in the FBS. He's not going to touch. He's not going to touch Zay Jones's record, but yeah, those are impressive numbers. And obviously, like you said, they pass all day long. But that's some good stuff. Jordan Addison is my second to last one here. There's a reason for Pickett's success being a top target with 17 touchdowns, leading the FBS, and he's 3rd in receiving yards and 7th in receptions. So yeah, Pittsburgh's top receiving target. And then the last one, the other defensive player you can consider. Jalen Foster from South Carolina, 90 tackles, 5 picks, and 2 sacks with 2 forced fumbles. That's an All-American year, especially in a hard-nosed SEC. So he did well. I think he finished 2nd in the FBS in picks. So and getting 90 tackles as a safety is pretty good. So those are the guys that just have, obviously you don't swap them out with some of those main 4, but you want to give recognition where it's due. Because that made a difference for their team this year.